Alright, so now let's move to step number 2, which is to compute equivalent units of production. So remember, in step number 1, we wanted to determine the units to be included in our computation. If I take a couple of slides back, we determined the units to be assigned cost. So in step number 2, we want to compute equivalent units of production. And keep in mind, we have to convert the percentages of the units that were not completed into a fraction of these units. So whole units are the number of units in production during a period, whether completed or not. These are the whole units. Equivalent units of production are the portion of whole units that are complete with respect to material or conversion. And here we're talking about direct labor and factory overhead cost. So again, whole units, this is like, let's say we have 100 units, whether we completed them or not, the 100 units are the whole units. Equivalent units, let's say we have 100 units, but we only completed them 70%. So these would be only 7 units, or in other words, equivalent to 7 units. So the whole units, it doesn't matter whether we completed them or not. We're going to count them anyway. But equivalent units, a completed unit would be counted as a unit, but a partially completed unit would be transformed into a percentage. So in other words, if we have, let's say, 100 units that are completed and another 100 units that are 70% completed, so the 100 and the 70% would be 170. Okay, as if this is equivalent to 170 units. So let's see this example. Assume that a 1,000-gallon batch of ice cream at Frozen Delight is only 40% complete in the mixing process on May 31st. Therefore, the batch is only 40% complete as to conversion costs such as power. So the whole units and equivalent units of production would be as follows. Again, for material and conversion, we have 1,000 gallons. For the whole units, it's 1,000 gallons. But for the equivalent units, since we use the material, it's going to be 1,000 gallons. But for the conversion, which is the direct labor and the factory overhead, we're going to multiply by 40%, which is the percent that completed, and that would be only equivalent to 400 gallons. So the material is always 100%, but the conversion cost, it's again based on what's the percentage of completion. So to compute equivalent units for material, it's necessary to know how material are added during the manufacturing process. In the case of Frozen Delight, all the material are added at the beginning of the mixing process. Frozen Delight's equivalent units for material in July are computed as follows. Remember, material, it's always 100%. We don't care too much about the percentage of completion. So for group 1, remember, we have the inventory and process that were 5,000 units. This were already used in the previous month, so the equivalent units for direct material is 0. For group 2, which are the ones started and completed in July, there were 62 minus 5, which is the 57. They were 100%, and that was 57. And the department, or the transfer out to packaging department in July would be the 5 plus the 57, which is 62,000, and that's the whole units. But for the equivalent units of material, it would be only 57. The group 3, which is the inventory that's still in process, we have 3,000, and that's 100%. Okay, and remember, the material is always 100%, so the equivalent units would be 3,000. So for the whole units, we have the 5,000 that were transferred from June. We have the 57, and then we have the 3,000. That would give us a total gallons to be assigned cost of 65,000 for the material. For the equivalent units, we have 0 for group 1, 57 for group 2, and 3,000 for group 3. That's a total of $6,000, or 60,000 gallons. So here is the direct materials equivalent units. Again, remember, direct material. The calculation for direct labor and overhead would be slightly different in the next slides. So here we have group number 1. We have the 5,000 equivalent units. It's 100% material added in June, but in our calculation of the equivalent units, these were not being included. But for the whole units, it would be part of the whole units. So for the units that started and completed, we have 57,000 gallons started and completed. So we have 100% material, and that's $57,000, 57,000 equivalent units of material. And then we have 3,000 gallons of ending inventory. These are the units that were started but were not completed. But again, the material is going to be completed in this case. So we have the 57 and the 3,000. That will give us a total of 60,000 total equivalent units of material cost in July. Again, remember, no material equivalent units added to beginning inventory for August. Okay, because that's going to be, like, for the equivalent units, this is going to be already used, so it's going to be 0 for August. How about conversion equivalent units? To compute the equivalent units for conversion costs, it's necessary to know how direct labor and factory overhead enter the manufacturing process. Direct labor, utilities, equivalent or equipment depreciation are often incurred uniformly during processing, as shown in the example of frozen delight. So the equivalent units for conversion costs in July would be computed as follows. We have group number 1, inventory in process. Remember, it was 70% completed, so the whole units are 5,000, but we have 30% that we complemented or completed during the month of July. So the equivalent would be the 5,000 multiplied by 30%, and that's going to be 1,500. Remember, for material, for the direct material, we assume that it's 100% material, and then the percentage was 0. So we had 0 equivalent units. But for conversion cost, or for the conversion equivalent units, we have to see how much would complement what was completed in the previous month, and that was the 30%. So we have 100% minus 70, that's the 30%. We multiply by the 5,000 to get the 1,500. And then group 2, these are started and completed. We have the 57, these were 62 minus 5, these were 100%, and the equivalent units in this case is 57. So transfer out to packaging department, we have, so the whole units are 62,000, but the equivalent units for conversion were 58,500, which is the total of these two numbers, 1,500 and the 57. The last part, or the last group, is group 3. This is the inventory in process. 25% only completed, and 75% would be completed in August. In this case, we have 3,000 whole units, only 25% completed, and that would be 75 or 750 gallons. So keep in mind, we multiply 25 for what was completed. Someone would ask me, why didn't we use 70% here? Because these 70% were completed in June. So we're complementing it. It's going to be 30%. Here, this is the inventory that we started in July, but we haven't completed, and we only completed 25. In August, we're going to do the same thing, but the percentage in August is going to be 75%. So we add these numbers, and that would be 59 to 50 gallons. These are the equivalent units for conversion. Remember, if I take you back here, we had 60,000 units. That was for direct material, or equivalent units for direct material. But here we have 59 to 50, that's equivalent units for conversion. I hope this is not creating any kind of confusion for you, but please make sure that you differentiate between these two. So again, to make sure that we understand the conversion, we have 3,500 equivalent units and 1,500 equivalent units for the months of July. The 3,500 were in June. 70% completed and 30% were completed in July. So 70% completed in June, 30% completed in July. And then we have 57,000 units. These were 100% completed for conversion in July. And then we had, remember, the 3,000 gallons. We only completed 25%, but 75% will be completed in August. So for the month of July, we're going to have this part only, the 1,500, the 57,000, and the 750. The total of these three numbers is the 59 to 50. The whole units, remember, we have 5,000, we have 57, and we have the 3,000. Okay, so here we have 5,000 that we started in June, and then we have 57 that we started and completed in in July, and then we have 3,000 that we started in July, but we're going to complete in August. Again, but the focus is on the conversion equivalent units, so it would be only these three numbers: the 1500, the 57, and the 75, and the 750. Now let's move to the step 3, which is to determine the cost per equivalent unit. The cost per equivalent unit. So the cost per equivalent unit for direct material and conversion costs would be computed as follows. For direct material cost per equivalent unit would be the total direct material cost for the period divided by the total equivalent units of direct material. And the conversion cost per equivalent units would be the total conversion cost for the period divided by the total equivalent units of conversion cost. Keep in mind, all these four numbers are going to be different. The direct material cost is different than the total conversion cost. The total equivalent units of direct material is different than the total equivalent units of conversion cost. So, the July direct material and conversion cost equivalent units for frozen delights mixing department from step number 2 are as follows. We have for group number 1, it was for direct material was 0, for conversion it was 1500. These were, what was the percentage? Just a quick refresher, that was the 30% remaining. And then the started and completed, these are the same, 57,000. The transfer out to packaging department, we have the 57,000 and the 58,500. And then for group 3, we have the inventory in process. Here we have for direct material the entire 3,000 because material is 100% always. For conversion, it's only 750. And remember, this was only 25% completed. So it was only 25%. But for direct material, if I can take you back, we always assume 100%. So again, these are the total units for direct material to be used, and these are the total equivalent units for conversion. So the 60,000 would be plugged in here, and the 59 to 50 is going to be plugged in here. Okay? So let's start with the material. The direct material and conversion costs incurred by Frozen Delight in July are as follows. For direct material, we had $66,000. The conversion, we had $10,500. The factory overhead was $7,275. So the total production is to the $66,000 plus the conversion cost of $17,775 for a total of $83,775. And that would be the number that we're going to plug here on the top. So direct material cost per equivalent unit would be the 66,000, which is this number, divided by the 60,000 gallons, and that would be 1.1. Again, the 66, these were the direct material, and this is the 60,000. This is the number of units, equivalent number of units. So 66,000 divided by 60 gallons, or 60,000 gallons, that's $1.10 per gallon. For the conversion cost equivalent, here we have 17,775, and this is this number, which is the total of these two numbers, the direct labor and the factory overhead. And then we're going to divide it by 59 to 50. Where did we get this from? This is this number here. So we have the 17,775 divided by 59 to 50, and the conversion cost per equivalent unit is 30 cents per gallon. So I hope this made it clear. Let's see step number 4, where we allocate the cost to units transferred out and partially completed units. So product costs must be allocated to the units transferred out and the partially completed units on hand at the end of the period. The product costs are allocated using the cost per equivalent unit for material and conversion costs that were computed in the previous step, which is step number 3. So the total production cost to be assigned for Frozen Delight in July are $90,000 computed as follows. We have the direct material for the inventory was 5,000. We have the conversion cost for the 5,000 gallons. And again, remember, that's during the month of July, 70% completed. That's 1,225. So the total inventory in process for July is 6,225. The direct material costs for July were 60,000 $66,000 for the 60 gallons. For the 60,000 gallons, the entire value was $66,000. The direct labor is the 10,500, the factory overhead 72.75, and the cost incurred in July is the total of these three numbers, which is 83,775. If we add these two together, then the total production cost to account for is $90,000. So $90,000 is the amount that we are going to allocate into three groups. Group number one, which is the inventory and process that we got from June, or in other words, we started with in July 1st. The second group is what we started and completed in the month of July. And then group three, which is the inventory that's still in process that we're going to move into the month of August. So the units to be assigned, these costs follow. The cost to be assigned, these units are indicated by the question mark. So again, we have group number one, we don't know how much would be the total cost. Group number two, the same thing, and group number three, we still don't know how much. The only thing we know is that the total cost is $90,000. So let me stop here. In the next video, we're going to do the calculation in each one of these groups.